Well, Ian, I'd like to finish by asking how you see your work as a scientist in relation to your Christianity, especially since we just talked about how religion informs scientific practice, and we've already seen how it in part contributed to your avoidance of work on inertial fusion. But if you'll permit me an anecdote, I have a very close family friend, like a little sister, the daughter of my childhood babysitter, and she's very Catholic, and she sees her work in environmentally sustainable architecture as work to help preserve and care for nature, which she views as God's creation. So I wonder if you see your work as a physicist as worship in some shape or form.
Quick answer: yes. I mean, there are various aspects of this. First of all, it's been the case since really the beginning of time that when humans have looked at the world and thought of it and seen it as a creation in its entirety, they've been drawn to worship, quite frankly, God. And the Bible is full, for example, the Psalms are full of poetry extolling the wonders of creation. And more recently, I mean, in the scientific revolution itself, there were a number of very important people, Kepler, for example, and Boyle and so forth, who spoke very eloquently about the fact that when they were discovering how the Earth moves, or how in general the universe works, they felt they were thinking God's thoughts after him. They were basically being drawn into a closer relationship and understanding of God through their scientific activities. And I would say, I don't want to be immodest about this. I mean, in general, when I'm solving a differential equation, I don't think I solve it any differently from anyone else, atheist or Christian or whatever. But I do often pause and I'm drawn into wonder at the creation and to give thanks to God. Actually, I think that awe and wonder is common to most scientists, whether they're religious or not, whether they believe in God or not. I think most of them would be able to express some sense of awe about the way the world works. I mean, the amazing consistency of a mathematical description in physics is awe-inspiring. And the way that the cosmos works is awe-inspiring. And in the case of a believer like me, that awe is directed to someone that we think, in some small way, we know, and it becomes a personal expression of worship. So that's part of the story. The other part of the story, I think, for me, is that I do try to act in ways in my science that honor God. And you've alluded to the question about topics of research. That has sometimes, for me, been importantly guided by my moral commitments, which spring largely from my Christian faith. But I think also it bears on the question of how you behave within the scientific community. And while none of us are perfect, and obviously there are always frictions and competitions and various human issues in the practice of science, I do think that the way that I practice science, I try to make as consistent with my moral commitments and my ethical beliefs and what I take to be the virtues, which I possess in some small quantity, but could probably improve, no doubt. So that's another driving force about the way that one acts. I mean, one particular way in which I think specifically the Christian faith has influenced me is that Jesus talks a lot about service and talks about the least being the greatest, etc. And I think that in science as a whole, there's a great tendency for people to blow their own horn, which a little bit of which is kind of okay. But I think that there's a sense in which Christians are called to a kind of servant leadership, in which they recognize their own devotion and, if you like, servitude towards God, and are willing, therefore, to serve others because of God's call upon their lives. And that can work itself out in various different ways. But if you're an academic, for example, professors know that, there have to be department heads. But boy, being a department head is a tough job because, it's a lot of administrative nonsense and you're basically not doing your own research. And yet, I think for a Christian, one is enabled to think in terms of the idea that serving my colleagues is a worthy calling for someone who has allegiance to Jesus Christ. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why, if you look around even a secular university as MIT, you find that actually Christians are amazingly strongly represented amongst the people who are department heads and take on other administrative roles in the university. And I suspect, well, I can't prove it, I suspect it's partly because they see value in helping other people. They are able to take pleasure in other people's success because of that sense of vocation, of Christian vocation to that task. So that's another aspect, I think, of the way in which one's religious commitments can be an important part of being maybe not just a successful scientist, but a scientist who is fruitful in enabling others to be successful.